What is going on in our coordinator search? We talk about that next on the Unbearable Sports Podcast.
I'm going to take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I got to go bold, right? I got to go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice long
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're out there on YouTube. And also download the podcast everywhere you get your podcast. Just search for Unbearable Sports. What's going on, everybody? It's another great day to have Ben Johnson as our head coach. So I wanted to put this show together, and I purposely wanted to listen to all these different interviews that we were having now that Ben Johnson is officially our head coach. I wanted to put together this show to kind of break down a lot of the stuff that I'm hearing, and then also talk about, just what we're hearing about the ownership, what we're hearing about Ben Johnson, what we're hearing about the coordinators, and also the free agents, because there's a little bit of news coming out from some insiders about who the Bears might be looking at this free agent cycle. So we got a lot to go through already. So let's hit it right now. Let's go straight into the ownership details that I kind of gathered. So like I said, listening to all sorts of different shows and interviews, and also listening to insiders. So it's not just a love fest. I've always said this about a lot of interviews. I don't like listening to most when it's, the press conferences and stuff like that, because a lot of times when people ask a question, it's like, what do you think of this person? Of course, they're going to say that they like someone. But when it came down to some of this ownership praise I was hearing from, different sources, different insiders, a lot of people were saying that Kevin Warren and George, that Kevin Warren actually deserves some kudos, because supposedly Kevin Warren was someone that really kind of woke George McCaskey up, and was like we've heard, Kevin Warren is the voice inside of there saying, hey, George, we are a world-class organization. We need to start spending money like a world-class organization. Send the private jet, send this so that it's a first-class organization, and also pay him like a first-class org should. So it sounds like Kevin Warren has a lot of thanks to go his way with just how he's kind of snapping George into learning how to be a world-class organization. Also, someone close to David Kaplan mentioned to him that, hey, Ryan Poles was great throughout all of this. And I just keep reading and seeing and hearing more and more about Ryan Poles and also Ben Johnson having a very good relationship. Because from what we know, when Ryan Poles was asked about this on ESPN 1000, Ryan Poles said that him and Ben Johnson will be doing all the personnel decisions together. He said that Ben's going to have a lot of say in the personnel decisions. So hopefully it means offensive line will be a little bit better, but it's nothing out of the ordinary. Ryan Poles was getting people for Matt Eberflus's system. Supposedly those linebackers, Tremaine Edmonds and Edwards, were specifically made for that system. So it sounds like, from hearing what Ben Johnson was saying, that, hey, he expects to be sitting down with Ryan Poles, watching some film, and kind of assess who is on this Bears team and say who should leave, who should stay, and really kind of assess the roster and also assess the free agents. Also, too, another thing that I want to just mention about Ryan Poles, he was talking to Carmen and Yurko on ESPN 1000 a little bit about just the leadership last year. And he said now he's reading a book to just kind of help things that, as he mentioned, bubbled up at the beginning of the season that just was never addressed. And so one can put two and two together and say, hey, you know what? I think he's talking about the whole not working hard in training camp, not holding people accountable. And really that just made it into this. It bled into the regular season and really started causing an issue. So speaking of Ryan Poles, though, there was one thing that really continues to stand out with Ryan Poles and who he might target in free agency. Now, Ryan Poles, before I even talk about what Ryan Poles said, Albert Breer reported that he expects Trey Smith to be a Chicago Bear. This is going to be a rare case where Trey Smith, the right guard from the Kansas City Chiefs, seen as one of the best guards in the NFL, is probably going to be hitting the open market because Kansas City has to spend money on Chris Jones, has to spend money on Travis Kelce, and all these other players. They don't have enough to pay their right guard, Trey Smith. So they would be shocked if they can't really use a franchise tag on him. They'd be shocked if they actually kept him. What do you know? Ryan Poles was part of the decision of getting him drafted to the Kansas City Chiefs. So a lot of people are saying, like Albert Breer, he expects that the Bears are probably going to sign this new right guard and solidify that spot after all the crazy fiascos that we had with Nate Davis. Now, he's expected to get around $20 million, which is a lot for a guard. And also, too, I think he's a really, really good guard, one of the best in the league. But is he like, I always think of like Zach Martin from when he was playing with the Cowboys, kind of that upper, like that next tier, that like true elite. He's really great. He's really great. So I wouldn't be mad by any stretch of the imagination if they ended up getting him. But still, just wanted to kind of call that out a little bit. And the other person too, Kevin Zeitler, also with Albert Breer reported with some light ties to the Bears because of Ben Johnson. And Kevin Zeitler, you'd expect him, because he's around 35 years old, expect that to be more so down in like the $7 million range, if anything, for just 1 year. So a lot cheaper, still a very good guard, but just yet again, longevity, Trey Smith would be good, because still very young guard at that right guard spot. Also too, when, like I said, when Poles was asked about the offensive line in free agency, you could hear him kind of get a little bit happy, have a big old smile and say, hey, we're already starting to do some UFA work. We're already starting to get excited about this offensive line class. So it does seem, I mean, as we were kind of expecting, that he is going to be adding an offensive lineman in free agency. That's why this guy up here, Trey Smith, might be that guy. Now, also when Ryan Poles was asked about Tevin Jenkins, something that he mentioned about Tevin Jenkins, quickly turned it over and started talking about dependability as a key piece. Like we've said, Tevin is a very good guard in the NFL, but his reliability, his dependability just hasn't been there. So it does still seem like Tevin's probably not going to be a Chicago Bear, but only time will tell. But yeah, my bet, I would be betting on Tevin not being a Chicago Bear, and the Bears looking to free agency to shore up guard to guard. So guard, center, guard. Expect that to probably be different next season. And now, enough of the whole personnel talk. Let's talk about the personality of Ben Johnson, because this is the big thing. Why I kind of wanted to take a couple days just to listen and take in who Ben Johnson is. And I know that some people out there, and I don't get this, because I think it's because he had got a 36 on his ACT, got a degree in math and computer science, and he's considered like the innovator. I think people think that he's Mark Trestman. I think people think he's just like a nerd, but he's not. He's not at all. Just because he's smart does not mean that he is a nerd. I've heard, I think it was like on Waddle and Sylvie, they were talking about he's the first guy. They're hearing that he's the first guy to cuss you out. If you made a mistake, he's going to get on you. He's going to get on you and be like, hey, you cannot be doing that. But also too, I thought his interviews were great. I loved listening to him talk during those interviews. But also too, you're just hearing the praise. Cole Kmet is getting text from former teammates on the Lions that are saying, you guys lucked out. This guy's amazing, and just praising Ben Johnson. You don't get that. Also too, Field Yates was asked about this as well, asked about Ben Johnson, and he said the savior has arrived. This guy is unreal. His success, and just so people are just praising, like, this guy is crazy good. He's not Matt Nagy. And I think that's the other thing that people kind of are concerned about. We saw this with Matt Nagy. And I think, honestly, if you want to talk about someone I think he talks similarly to, is kind of like Matt Nagy. He's kind of got this happiness. And keep in mind, a lot of people liked Matt Nagy until they started losing. And also, why did the Matt Nagy era ultimately stop? Because he didn't really know how to call plays. Matt Nagy had less than 1 year of experience calling plays. Now think about this with Ben Johnson. He's had multiple years calling plays and also not calling someone else's scheme like Matt Nagy was doing in Kansas City. Ben Johnson creates his own scheme, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But another thing I love about Ben Johnson, he was asked about this by John Yurkovich, who John Yurkovich, if anyone listens to him, he's hysterical. I absolutely adore him. And he he harps on how weak the training camps were for the Chicago Bears under Matt Eberflus, and he asked Ben Johnson what he thinks. And Ben said, hey, first off, sports science is huge for him. So he's like, we have to regulate how much rest and everything that people are getting. But he wants them to tackle. He wants them to hit. And he cited that the Detroit Lions were one of the best tackling teams because they were practicing tackling. Go figure. So Ben, yeah, he's not just going to be someone that's like, let's just be light and let's not hit anybody. He's quite the opposite. He's actually a fiery person that's going to get on people and say, you need to do your job and also enforce tackling. So all the good stuff is happening right now. And also too, he's a Cubs fan. His brother has season tickets. So you got to love that too. But really, I just continue to really like Ben Johnson. And for those watching out there, let me know what you think about some of the interviews that he had down below, because it makes me like him even more. And something that also makes me like him even more is our next segment, Caleb's scheme. Now, Ben Johnson, like we've said, Ben Johnson is not like how everybody is like a Shanahan disciple, a McVay disciple, Andy Reid disciple. Everyone is a disciple of someone. But like we said, Ben Johnson is his own dude. And when we watch this tape, it's not a standard system. Now, he does like to run a lot of like run counters and stuff like that. But still, what he said is he told Caleb, and Caleb even said this when he got interviewed. He said, Ben said, they're going to build the system around me. And the way that Ben said it is he goes, what we did in Detroit is I sat down with Jared Goff and we went through some of the plays. And something that really stood out to me was Ben Johnson said that if Caleb has a play that he likes, he's going to make it work. And that is brilliant, because how many times do you at work want something to happen? You're going to try everything in your power to get this thing to work. And just like with the play, I could see Caleb being like, this is one of my favorite plays to run. I really like it. Caleb is now personally invested in this. It's like sales 101. Make it the other person's idea. And if Caleb is like, yeah, this is my play, I want this to work, he's going to take it personally and he's going to have a vested interest in that thing working. I really like just the way that he is going to have this playbook and really kind of build it around Caleb and talk to Caleb about what this system should be to play to Caleb's strengths. So I think you're going to see more of a Cliff Kingsbury type of an offense with some mixes of what worked at Detroit as well. Also too, speaking of the whole system, Ben Johnson was asked about the offensive line, and he brought up that, yeah, it was no secret the offensive line was a little weak. So it was nice that he wasn't just trying to sugarcoat it. He did say they just have to see if it's more of a schematic thing, if it's a personnel thing, because it just kind of assess what they should do with this offensive line. But really, I just thought it was really cool that this system is going to be built around Caleb. And another piece too that I just want to mention, he also called out our favorite Big Bill, Andrew Billings, as a gigantic loss for the Bears. He said it was just different. Then the running system was just ridiculously leaky after that. So, speaking of bad things that happened to the Bears, let's talk. Now it's real talk. Now we have to start talking about this coaching search, right? All the warm and fuzzies are out of the way. So now let's talk about this coaching search. Let's talk about what just happened today. And that is the Bears let go some of their coordinators. So reported originally from Adam Johns, the Bears are reported that Thomas Brown, Chris Beatty, the wide receivers coach, Kerry Joseph, the quarterbacks coach, Chris Morgan, the O-line coach, and defensive coordinator Eric Washington were all let go from the Chicago Bears. Also, Chad Morton, the running backs coach, will not be retained. And same thing with their nickelbacks coach, David Overstreet. Now, I've heard good things about David Overstreet, but at the same time, with a new regime, typically you're seeing everybody go. Hoke, who has been their defensive backs coordinator, I could see him being someone that maybe, if you want to talk about someone being retained, he has been a very, very good coach, but typically you do see people part ways. Someone to at least keep an eye out for is actually the Bears special teams coordinator. Look at Richard Hightower as potentially staying on as your special teams coordinator. Because as all these coaches are let go, because like I said, I think what they're trying to do is if you just clean house, you don't have that familiar face. You have to be uncomfortable. You have to learn from this new regime how we're going to do things, because clearly the coaching staff last year did not hold people accountable. They want their own people in there as well. So let's talk a little bit about these coordinators, because everyone was like, okay, it seems like we're going to get our coordinators in place. And like I said, Richard Hightower, look for him to potentially be your special teams coordinator, because Darren Rizzi, who seemed like the Bears were pursuing, or was reported that the Bears were pursuing the special teams coordinator for the Saints, he still could be in the fold, but Richard Hightower might be one of the candidates along with Rizzi at that position. But then also too, something that kind of turned a little bit of heads is the Bears have requested for Rams offense assistant head coach and passing game coordinator Aubrey Pleasant for their defensive coordinator job. Now, he was with the Lions in 2022 and also I think 2020 to 2022. So he is someone that that Ben Johnson does know. Also, a lot of people were saying, hey, seems like he was a big reason that kind of helped with Chris Shula's defense at the Rams. And then last but not least, Vikings game passing coordinator, defensive passing coordinator, and defensive backs coach Geronte Jones is they're going to request to interview him for the Bears defensive coordinator position. So this got a lot of us Bears fans going, so what the heck's going on with this coordinator position? Because we went from Darren Rizzi and, Allen and, oh man, like look at all these people that we could potentially get, to then some of these backups. Now, something that I have heard is that Dennis Allen, the former Saints head coach, is someone that is going to come at a pretty high price tag. And now this goes back to what we originally talked about with Kevin Warren. If the Bears want the best coaching staff, you have to pay it. So I do have some concerns about this, because it's not saying that the people that we're interviewing are not going to be good defensive coordinators, right? Aubrey Pleasant or Geronte Jones. What I'm saying is it's really, really beneficial. Like I said with Sean McVay, when you see these offensive-minded first-time head coaches, the best thing that they could get is someone who has done it and someone who you can trust to just own an entire half of the defense, an entire half of football operations. If you can trust someone to do that, like a former head coach that you can also lean on, that can give you some tips, give you some advice. Yeah, there's an assistant head coach, right? It's Aubrey Pleasant, assistant head coach. But still, I think it's important to try and get someone like a Dennis Allen. So there's no reports that Dennis Allen is out of the hunt, but maybe they're just bringing in some people, talking to them, and just kind of understanding who's out there. And maybe it's for other positions, who knows? Just because it's being reported as defensive coordinator, you know how things can change. And like with Thomas Brown coming in as as a quarterback's passing game coordinator rather than anything else. So where is everybody also? Because also people are wondering, what about Hank Fraley, the offensive line coach for the Lions? Brad Bix reported does not sound like Bears will be a destination for offensive line coach Hank Fraley. Perhaps Ben Johnson does get an assistant from Detroit to join him, but Fraley is not expected. Johnson isn't going to raid Dan Campbell's staff. So that's another key important piece right there too. Maybe he's not going to have that. Maybe Hank Fraley ends up going to the Jets and then tries to be the OC there. Maybe he stays inside of Detroit as well. So reported by Brad Biggs. Brad Biggs, very, very connected with the Chicago Bears, but lots of stuff going on. This offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator search is going to be something that we are going to be watching like a hawk. So if you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe out there. It helps out the channel tremendously. And also download the podcast everywhere you get your podcast, because we'll have you covered. Hope you all enjoyed it. Rate 5 stars out there. An Unbearable Sports Podcast. We are out.
Yeah, She's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's